Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the question-and-answer session, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's conference call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I now would like to turn the conference call over to Linda Harbazizi. You may begin.
Thank you, and good afternoon for those of you joining on the East and West Coast. Thank you for joining for our webinar on the energy opportunities in Colombia. My name is Linda Harbazizi, and I'm an International Trade Specialist for the Marketing Communications Office for the U.S. Commercial Service at the Department of Commerce. This webinar is being brought to you in cooperation by the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. This webinar will provide an overview of energy opportunities in Colombia, as well as the upcoming Louisiana and Texas trade missions to Colombia, which will take place on November 1st through the 5th in this year. The mission will also include the Expo Oil and Gas Colombia Trade Show in Cartagena, Colombia, which will be held on November 2nd through the 5th of this year. In a moment, I'll turn this presentation over to Margaret Hanson-Muth, who is a commercial counselor, and Julio Carbo, commercial specialist, both of the U.S. Embassy in Colombia. Following Mr. Carbo will be followed by Ms. Xiomara Craig, International Business Development Officer for the Americas at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Later, Ms. Delilah De Sousa from the International Trade Specialist of the Export Assistance Center in New Orleans, and Ms. Nyamusi K. Igami, Senior International Trade Specialist of the Export Assistance Center in Houston, Texas, will share details about the upcoming Louisiana and Texas trade mission. All of these speakers will be available at the end of this presentation to answer your questions, and contact information will also be provided to everyone. Now, for those of you who just joined, you can still log into this webinar by entering the URL, website, and passcode per instructions that were sent to you by email. And to make sure everyone gets the most benefit from this webinar, you'll be able to hear this presentation via your telephone and view it simultaneously via your computer. So if you're not hooked up through both, please take a moment to do this. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please press star 0 anytime during this presentation. Now, to download the PowerPoint presentation slides from this webinar and also the handouts that are also going to be in association with today's theme and webinar, on the upper right-hand side is an image which looks like there are 3 pieces of paper which are located at the top of this page. If you put your mouse's cursor over this icon, you'll be able to download all the handouts as well as the PowerPoint presentation slide. Now, during this presentation, we will be taking voice and written questions. Now, to ask a voice question, please press star 1 on your telephone. We do invite you to type in questions on your screen as they occur to you for the written Q&A of this webinar. Also, on the left-hand side of your computer, there's another icon with the letters Q&A, which stands for question and answers. And if you click on this icon, you can click and type in your questions anytime during this presentation, and we will compile these questions and present as many as time allows for this presentation. Set questions which are not answered during this webinar due to some time constraints, we will receive or we will get back to you via a personal email afterwards. Now, for those of you who just joined us and logged in, you can still join in the Internet conference. But now I'd like to introduce live online commercial counselor Margaret Hanson-Muth of the U.S. Embassy in Bogota, Colombia. Maggie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the audience that you have gathered for me today. I'm Maggie Hanson-Muth. I've been here in Colombia for 3 years and witnessed the incredible growth and transformation during the Uribe administration that has really afforded new opportunities for U.S. exporters. In particular, we have, I think, very exciting opportunities thanks to the support of the U.S. Exim Bank in the oil and gas industry. Let me tell you a quick story about how it all began. Probably 10 years ago, the U.S. Trade Development Agency targeted the hydrocarbons industry here in Colombia as one of their top priorities. After years of providing grants and studies, it resulted in 2 major awards. The first being to Chicago Bridge and Iron, a $3.8 billion award to modernize the refinery in Cartagena, and the second being to Foster Wheeler probably a $3.6 billion award to modernize the Barranca Bermeja refinery here in Colombia. Well, that sounds great. An engineering services company has won these contracts. What does it mean for you, the U.S. exporter? It means a huge opportunity to provide anything ranging from nuts and bolts to pipes to sophisticated electronic sensors, pumps, valves, and compressors in order to be able to take part in these exciting changes here in Colombia. So I'm going to, for those of you who have not been to Colombia before, take a very quick walkthrough. We know we kept you waiting, so I want to make this as quick as possible so that everybody has a chance to speak and you have a chance to ask your questions. So we'll walk through what it's like to do business in Colombia, and we'll spend a little time talking about the needs that Ecopetrol is going to have in the future. And Xiomara, my colleague from Exim Bank, will tell you about the $1 billion commitment that Exim made in January 20th of this year to try and make it more attractive for you U.S. exporters to send your products to Colombia. You're looking at our first slide, which has three different scenarios from Colombia, and I think this helps sum up what it's like here. It's diversity. Colombia has a diverse climate, vegetation, fauna, and people. I'm trying to go to the next slide.
I got it, Maggie.
Okay, thank you. For Colombia, it has about 45 million people. It's 3 times the size of Montana or twice the size of France. I'm a scuba diver, so it excites me that in Colombia I'm able to go diving in places like San Andres, Providencia, and the Santa Catalina archipelago. For those of you who've never been here, Delta, Continental, and American Airlines run frequent nonstop service from 4 gateway cities, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, and Newark, to Bogota, Medellin, Cali, and Cartagena, and Barranquilla. Also, during the time I've been here, Spirit Airways and JetBlue have been granted routes if you want to take a lower-cost, no-frills airline to get to Colombia. Avianca, the national carrier, now has a direct flight from Washington, D.C. in a code share with Delta, and Spirit Airways will be initiating service to what's called the Coffee Triangle from its Fort Lauderdale hub. The country, as you can see, has access to 2 oceans, and we really advise that you take a few Spanish classes before you travel because Spanish is the official language. Also think about printing your sales materials and ads in Spanish. Next slide, please. I put the BlackBerry in this slide because I want you guys to understand that Colombia is a modern society where your BlackBerries will work. The country is experiencing an infrastructure boom. We have now opened the new JW Marriott here. There are now 2 Marriott hotels in Bogota alone, and Marriott has the intention of building 7 more hotels in the next 5 years. Hyatt and Hilton are not far behind. In terms of road infrastructure, we're seeing basically the equivalent of the interstate system of the United States that was built during the Eisenhower administration being built and deployed here in Colombia in the next 5 years. We have also huge mass transportation projects in major cities under construction. The country is also stepping up its efforts to produce oil and natural gas as well as minerals like coal, gold, and emeralds. If you look at how the elections have been, this is the most stable democracy in the hemisphere after the United States, a very long tradition of elections. We recently had our election of the new president who will take office August the 7th, along with his new team. You've also seen that the peso is appreciated against the dollar without hyperinflation. What that means is because we don't have a free trade agreement, your products will be less expensive to your European and other competitors. We can't beat out Chinese competition because they sell things very cheaply here, but at least people, if you sell on a quality basis, you'll have a bit of an advantage over other suppliers. Next slide, please. One thing to keep in mind is Colombia has never defaulted on its debt payments. Many people worry about what they call shaky Latin American governments. At this point, they are not investment grade. We expect that to happen within the next 24 months. They're the fifth largest market for U.S. products in Latin America. When I came here in 2007, they were 29th in terms of U.S. exports. Now they're 26th in terms of receiving U.S. exports in the world. Good news for manufacturers. They use U.S. standards in water, electricity, and obviously oil and gas engineering equipment, and they really do prefer U.S. products. We have lots of U.S. franchises here, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC. Everybody watched the World Cup via cable TV or direct TV. You have DSL access via cable into your home. You do have some public wireless internet, but it's usually limited to hotel lobbies. Next, please. With the exception of 1 year, the economy has grown steadily for the last 72 years. The global economic crisis had an impact on them, but they didn't go negative like we did in the United States. The other key factor to keep in mind, and this is another reason why we're seeing such tremendous growth in the oil and gas industry, is what we call the Venezuela effect. The Venezuelans closed their border to trade the fourth quarter of last year, and that has really negatively impacted Colombia's GDP. And about this weekend or last Friday, Venezuela broke diplomatic relations with Colombia. We believe that things will be changing with the new administration. However, it does mean that even more emphasis is going to be placed on the Colombian oil and gas industry as it becomes even more difficult to do business with Colombia. Next slide, please. You'll see the tremendous growth here of Colombia. It's an economic miracle, having nearly tripled its exports and imports from 2000 up to 2009. We expect the 2010 growth rate to recover to a more reasonable percentage of 3 to 4% in terms of GDP growth. Next, please. Just so that people understand, I always like to put up this slide with just a reference to Pablo Escobar. Many people still don't realize he died in 1993, and really the U.S. government, working with the Colombian government, has made tremendous progress in terms of improving the security here in Colombia. That's one of the reasons why we're seeing more and more multinational companies switch their headquarters from Caracas to Bogota. It's a safer place to do business. You have more formal business practices, and you have much, much improved security. The picture on the right is a picture of downtown Bogota at night. Next, please. I can't not make a presentation without dealing with the C word, in this case, corruption. I can't say that it's been totally eliminated from Colombia, but compared to what it was like in 1990s, there's a lot more transparency. People understand that bribery just doesn't work. And once you start paying a bribe, you'll never be able to stop. And with more and more companies like Ecopetrol listing themselves on the New York Stock Exchange, you have more supervision by the Department of Justice and the SEC. So you really do see that people are trying to clean up their act. You're seeing also that Colombia has gone from just being Juan Valdez, I export coffee, to diversifying its exports and to signing more free trade agreements. Their economy is becoming more and more open each day. They still have a ways to go, and the U.S. government, through USAID, works on these kinds of issues, especially to open opportunities for small to medium-sized companies. Next, please. These are your challenges. There's still at least 4 big social challenges and 5 big economic challenges. But the key strategy for U.S. exporters to keep in mind is to offer trade financing to address the last issue. Many of your partners here may lack access to credit financing, and therefore, if you're able to come in with your Exim Bank financing lined up, you will find a big open market. You also need, if you've never done business here before, you also need to be aware that probably 60% of the economy, of the businesses, are informal, and you'll run into a lot of red tape. But if you're working with the commercial service, Delilah, my colleagues Delilah and Naya, and our office here, you will be able to overcome that red tape and join the thousands of U.S. companies that have been successful doing business here. Next, please. You'll see that we expect Colombia's to grow 3 to 4%. Again, I already mentioned the Venezuelan border. That will still continue to have an impact on trade. My biggest concern as representing U.S. business interests here is the growing influence of China, India, and Brazil. And I know in the oil and gas industry, especially since the disaster in the Gulf, there will be more emphasis on high-quality equipment, which is where I believe U.S. companies have a definite advantage and guarantees. This is something that China and India, in their haste to sell things quickly, they sometimes skimp on quality. So that is something to really hammer as you market your products here. Colombia is doing a lot more trade and investment with Peru. They've accepted UL standards. They are the largest Facebook user in Latin America. So if you think that there's a way to market your product using social marketing, go right ahead, because you'll find that there are communities on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I already mentioned that the Exim Bank granted $1 billion to Ecopetrol to use to purchase U.S. products. Next, please. Just a quick run-through of the FTA negotiations. Ours is still pending ratification in the U.S. Congress, but Canada and the European Union have approved their FTA, and the question is, when will they implement? Some say as soon as January 2011 for Canada, which will make life very difficult for us here, especially if you're a wheat farmer. But we will see, because we know that in Colombian law there's still many hurdles and reforms that they have to undertake and implement before they will be able to respect the obligations they've signed up for. So we're hopeful that the U.S. Free Trade Agreement will be ratified by the U.S. Congress in the coming months. Next, please. Just in case you hadn't heard, since a lot of them are from Texas, our 3 hostages were released 2 years ago. We actually had a huge 4th of July party to celebrate that on the 2nd of July this year. But in general, people always ask me, what are the stats? Here are the stats. Security just is not the issue that it used to be, but we do advise people to use just common sense when you're going into remote areas. Check with the embassy, check with the company that you're working with to make sure you're taking the right measures. Next, please. Now we just get into what the best prospects are for Colombia. We're talking about oil and gas, so Linda, we can just go through these next slides fairly quickly. Next, please. We'll now start to talk about oil and gas. So I'm going to turn it over to Julio briefly to describe what's going on in the oil and gas industry.
Thank you, Maggie. Well, Colombia is the third largest exporter of crude oil in South America after Brazil and Venezuela. And the growth of the market is continuing at an even faster rate. Colombia had reserves of 1.9 billion barrels and a production level of 671,000 barrels per day. But as of June 2010, the production rate increased to 767,000 barrels per day, of which Ecopetrol, the largest Colombian oil company, the national oil company, is producing 550,000 barrels per day. The ratio between reserves and production yields 8 more years of production levels and consumption internally for fuels. So the country has embarked on a large exploration campaign in order to identify new reserves. Natural gas reserves in 2009 reached 8.6 teracubic feet of gas, and the production level as of June of 1,116 million cubic feet per day. And the reserves to production ratio is 22.8 years. The seismic prospecting activity has reached 112,000 kilometers of seismic 2D equivalent, and A3 wells drilled since 2002 reached 443. This is a record number. In addition, the contracting activities by the National Hydrocarbons Agency, that is the agency that administers the hydrocarbon resource, has reached 346 contracts, of which 266 are actual exploration and production contracts, and the remainder are the so-called technical evaluation assessment, basically developing additional studies, pre-processing seismic before actually committing to any drilling activity. Right now, the assigned area for exploration reached 21 million hectares, of which 14 million is onshore, and the remainder offshore, both in the Caribbean and Pacific Ocean. The production areas are 2 million hectares. Recently in June, the National Hydrocarbons Agency awarded 80 blocks on the so-called Ronda Colombia. It's an auction of 47 million hectares of 228 blocks in areas that had onshore in the Caribbean all the way to San Andres Island, north of Panama, and the Pacific Ocean, the whole coastline, and a smaller mini blocks for smaller companies.
Don't change the slides, Linda. Just hold there, please.
Ecopetrol changed as a global and competitive industry as when President Uribe enacted Decree 1760 in 2003 that authorized the government to auction off 10% of the company and created what is so-called mixed economy, where majority is still owned by the government. Ecopetrol is the fourth oil company in Latin America.
Fourth largest.
The fourth largest, and 17% production growth in 2009. It controls over 10,000 kilometers of transportation infrastructure and has an existing 330,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. Ecopetrol has procurement needs up to the year 2020, a strategic plan of up to $80 billion, and aims to produce 1 million barrels per day in 2015 and up to 1.3 million barrels per day by 2020. The projected investments for 2010 is $6.9 billion, of which 68% goes to exploration, $4.5 billion, and production investments and exploration of $951 million. The current investments for this year for the refinery capacity is $1.3 billion, and the project aims to reach the refining capacity of 415,000 barrels per day in 2013 in two projects, one in Cartagena, one in Barranca Bermeja. In addition, the company is streamlining their procurement process. It is not necessary for U.S. companies to register at this point of time, but basically, if you surf the website www.ecopetrol.com and look for proveedores, it's basically suppliers, and look for the contracting alternatives, you will find links for market intelligence, selection processes, previous contracting activities, and so on. I will provide you the information of these links at a later date. We have key contacts in Ecopetrol that specializes on different areas.
All right, we'll return to the presentation, please, Linda.
Okay, stay in the slide.
Okay. You have to unlock it. Okay. Julio talked about the refinery projects, and we've listed what we think the equipment needs are going to be. Also keep in mind that Ecopetrol, if you look at its logo, it's an iguana, and that stands for clean energy. They're looking to clean up diesel, get rid of sulfur, and do anything that makes sense in terms of providing more energy to people at a lower cost and on a clean basis. So these are just some of the things that we came up with, and Naya and Delilah have a study that Julio wrote that will enable you to go into more detail. All of the statistics that he read to you will be available as a handout, so it'll be uploaded shortly. Okay, next slide, please. This just talks about what Exim is doing with Ecopetrol here in Colombia. Exim is also interested in working on the Bogota airport renovation, and I'm not going to say anything more because this is really Diomada's area. Next, please. You can keep going. These are just the other best prospects. Next, please. Next, please. We talked a bit about the refinery modernization, but since a lot of people in oil and gas have some sort of tangential relationship with ports and other infrastructure projects, we want you to know that there's 3 ports that are undergoing a big renovation. We already told you a little bit about the superhighway that's being built. Colombia is planning to launch a satellite, and besides the Bogota airport, there's another package of airports that are going to be privatized and concessions in the next year. Next, please. This just tells you the trade shows that we're doing in 2010 that don't really relate to you. Next, please. In 2011, we'll be coming back again to the Offshore Technology Conference. I don't know, those of you who were there, but Colombia had a lunch for 350 people. It was the largest one in the history of the conference, and therefore there's a lot of excitement about our little country. Next, please. Just so that you know, we do run trade missions to Colombia. The one we're targeting to invite you to is the one that we're running in conjunction with a certified trade show, November 2 through 5 of this year. You'll come to Bogota for a day and then go to Cartagena for 4 days. Delilah and Naya will tell you more about that. Next, please. Now, if you've never done business in Colombia, these are things that you absolutely must do. If you would like to work with us to find your local partner, work through Naya and Delilah, and they'll hook you up. If you've already found a local partner, talk to us directly so that we can do a background check in order to make sure they're not a bad person, because you can't use the excuse, I didn't know, with the Department of Justice. They want to make sure that you're not doing business with a known narco-trafficker or a known terrorist. Frankly, this applies to Israel, it applies to Saudi Arabia, it applies to countries in Africa, it applies to China, it applies to Hong Kong. Wherever you go, you absolutely must do a thorough background check before you sign a contract for somebody to represent your company. It's very, very important. Also, we caution you to include arbitration clauses in your contract with distributors in case you need a less expensive way than the court system to get out of a problem. And in terms of security, you just use situational awareness. It's like being in Los Angeles, Houston, or New York City. You just have to be on the lookout wherever you are, and stay in touch with the embassy if you think you need more support. Next, please. Well, that concludes our presentation, and I turn it back over now to Linda to continue on with the next part of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. We will be here listening and available to answer your questions.
Okay, great. I think we have a representative from Export-Import Bank who would also like to explain a little bit about her experience. Her name is Leomara Kresh of Export-Import Bank, and we'll try to get the slides here for her.
Thank you, Linda and Maggie, for such a great presentation, as well as Julio. I think with the background given on doing business in Colombia, you have a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about the opportunities and why Exim Bank has selected Colombia as a market of interest. For those of you that are not familiar, Linda?
Yeah.
Well, okay, perfect. Thank you. For those of you that are not familiar with Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank is the official, hold on. I'm sorry about that. We have an interruption. Party just walked into my office. So we are the official export agency of the United States. We are completely independent, and our mission is to support you, to support U.S. export in markets where either there is a sense of potential risk, be commercial or political. We cover both sectors. Since 1934, when we were created, we have supported more than $400 billion in transactions. It's important to note that we were created in 1934, immediately after the Great Depression, and with the purpose of supporting and creating more U.S. jobs. I'm not saying we are in a depression, but we certainly are going through difficult times, and we have seen a tremendous amount of requests from the banking community on Exim Bank transactions. What we do is basically we assume the risk that the commercial sector will not assume. The majority of the transactions that we do it through commercial banks. In other words, the commercial banks are the lender. We guarantee the lenders that in the event of default from the foreign buyer, we will make whole the lender, and therefore the transaction becomes immediately a direct deal between the borrower and Export-Import Bank. I have a slide coming up later on explaining the actual process. We level the playing field, and we also interact and try to work with other ECA like China, Korea, Japan, Germany, Italy, Spain. We have done a tremendous amount of transactions with this ECA on a co-financing basis. And what we do, if you have a transaction where there is a significant U.S. content and also foreign content associated, we can negotiate a contract just with the Export-Import Bank, and we can, in turn, refinance with a foreign ECA for that portion. So if you have such a transaction that is eligible for co-financing, we can work together before you actually go ahead and sign a contract to see the eligibility. In fiscal year from October 1st of this year to September 30, we're coming into closing. We approved more than 2,891 transactions, which represented about $21 billion in supported transactions. That represented approximately $4.4 billion of direct support for small business. And that is the focus for the bank. The bank has created a small business unit, and we are very focused into supporting a small business. And last year, we have more than 550 businesses that were using Exim Bank for the first time. So it is great to see that the small business in the U.S. is diversifying and not only sending goods and services to Mexico because of proximity and knowledge of the market, but they're actually crossing the ocean. This slide will show you a quick overview of how our portfolio is looking today. And as you look at this, you only see a 22% for Latin America. However, it is important to note that we do not have a portfolio assigned for a market or a country. We are basically demand-driven. If we get more transactions from Latin America rather than Asia or Europe, so be it. We will approve them based on the creditworthiness. So the fact that we have more in one market than the other does not necessarily help us move in that direction. I think this is more, the portfolio by sector will show you more of what you're looking at, which is the oil and gas and the power and energy sector, which the statistic shows quite small in comparison to the aircraft, but aircraft and very high dollar value ticket items, and they will easily eat up any pie. But our portfolio is very strong in the oil and gas industry. We have been involved in that industry since the early 40s. And I think I'd like to now spend some time talking about Colombia in general. and why we selected Colombia. The bank is open in more than 150 countries, out of which probably 70 plus 80 are very active in our lending portfolio. We selected, the chairman of the bank asked us to look at 11 markets that we thought will represent opportunities for U.S. exporters. And out of those 11 markets, Colombia is one of them, and I think that's a big plus for Colombia, because in the last couple of years our portfolio there has been very small. However, we see a tremendous opportunity in sectors like Maggie and Julio just indicated, not only in the construction but in the oil and gas industry as well. We started heavily promoting Exim Bank again in the market back in December 2007. Since then, we have made numerous trips to the market, visiting companies, letting them know our availability of credit, as well as government officials, and participating on trade mission. I think if you participate in this one, we'll have an opportunity to have a meeting on a one-on-one basis, as we are hoping to participate as well. And Julio indicated that there are a tremendous amount of opportunities. You have bolts from Thompson, and you also have compressor. We do see a lot of this, what I'm going to call today, small transaction, because the majority of the time when we speak in billions and millions of dollars. But do keep in mind that the day-to-day operation of this particular institution is doing small transactions. We do on a day-to-day basis 30 to 40 transactions, more than the majority of the transactions that I highlighted earlier. They're all in the small business sector or small deals per se, below that $1 million, that $5 million mark. I'm going to move over to the next one. And what do we look for on a foreign buyer? In order for us to extend credit to a foreign buyer to buy the goods and services that you're selling, we need to have reasonable assurance that that particular entity has the capacity to absorb the debt that they are planning to acquire. The key elements, as Maggie indicated very bluntly, is know your customer. We ask that the buyers and the lenders and that everyone do their due diligence on the customer. We will also do the same. So it will be quite a tragedy, to say the least, that you will go through the exercise of signing a contract and actually be ready to and put your personal to work on a transaction to find out when the transaction gets to us, when we do our due diligence, that we find undesirable characters. So that is number one on your list of doing business, and it's something that I recommend 100% because we also have to do our due diligence internally. We have various products. In addition to being able to lend directly to the borrowers in Colombia, we have working capital. Perhaps you have a transaction where you're producing some goods and you do not have the capital to fulfill the order. In that case, we are open and we can do a working capital loan to your company here in the U.S. Once the transaction is post-export and the actual shipment take place, we can take a look and see what are the potential of financing that given transaction or any other transaction that you have. In addition to working capital, which is geared directly to the U.S. exporter, not to the buyers, we have insurance where the U.S. exporter can buy an insurance policy, be for a buyer in Colombia, be for multi-buyers or different or multi-country. The policies can be purchased directly from the exporter, or you can utilize a bank that might have a policy to sell to your customer. We also have guarantees, and the way that the guarantee works, as I mentioned earlier, we have a U.S. bank that has an agreement with Exim Bank. We call it a master guarantee agreement, which allow them to lend on our behalf, utilizing their own proceeds, and guaranteed by the U.S. government. The same applies with direct loan, where the U.S. government extends a loan directly to the porting entity that is buying your goods and services. Important to know here is that unless you have been paid, we pay, be it direct loan, we pay the U.S. exporter, and if it is the lender pay you directly. So payment mechanism occurs once you have made your shipment. So that is the determining factor of when payment appear in your account, when you ship and present documentation. I highlighted medium term because in a lot of the transactions that we see, even though Maggie clearly indicated that we have a $1 billion facility approved with Petrobras, just came back from Brazil, Ecopetrol. In this facility those cover many different transactions. So it's not only for doing direct or insurance, it can be used many different ways. And the trigger and the driver of that transaction is Ecopetrol, not Exim Bank. They decide how they want to utilize the transaction. But as you sell to them, they have an office in Houston. You might be familiar with them, and the information is on the last press release that came out regarding the signing with Ecopetrol. You can decide and discuss it with their procurement office in Houston. I have put here some of the elements that we look on a transaction before we approve it, but I think rather than to go deep into financial analysis or pre-financial analysis of a potential transaction, it is good to know that we do not have a minimum or a maximum, be for a buyer or for a country. So that gives you an open field of opportunities in Colombia and in several sectors. As long as we are open in Colombia, we will be supporting transactions. We have one of the points that is highlighted on this page is the fact that if a transaction is more than $10 million, it is considered to be long-term. What that means is that any shipment made above for long-term transaction over $20 million has to occur in U.S. registered vessel. So if there is no capacity on or you are not able to find U.S. registered vessel, you have to require a waiver from the Maritime Administration. And that's something that we do not have responsibility management. We are only have that on our requirements as a sister agency, government agency, to enforce the regulations. So something to keep in mind, anything shipped by air does not apply. It only applies to maritime shipment. The next page continue to talk about the criteria of how we determine whether a buyer has the capacity to repay us. Debt servicing EBITDA should be no greater than 150, and we're looking for that the actual exposure of the Exim Bank versus the net worth is less than 40%. So I don't want, you're a seller, you're out there selling your good. My suggestion will be once you have a potential customer in country, in Colombia, or any other market that you're looking at, that you either consult with a commercial bank or a broker. We have a list of the commercial banks on our webpage on the lender's referral. We also have a list of authorized brokers that are selling our insurance product here in the United States only, available on the web. Also, the lenders, the commercial banks, do have their own brokers in country. In Colombia, a couple of U.S. banks have agents, and those agents work directly for the bank, not directly for Exim Bank, but they happen to be familiar with our products, so they are good resources for you as well. keep an eye on that information, the fact that we are going to be looking at a company in Colombia that has more than 3 years of financial history. If it happens to be a brand new entity, then we need a guarantee from a local bank or another company associated. We need to make sure that the entity that we are evaluating has the capacity to repay, and unfortunately, new companies do not have that track record. So as you deal with new entities, keep that in mind, whether it be a new joint venture or something to that effect. Keep in mind that we are, at the end of the day, looking for that reasonable assurance for repayment and that capacity of that particular borrower to repay us. All of this information, especially medium-term credit standards, we have them available online. You have the capacity to take a look at them. The majority of all of our applications and standards are available online. We want our customer, our U.S. exporter, when they go out and sell, to have all the tools available to not only provide the actual sale of the goods and services, but bring with them the financing. As you all know, this day is not only selling, you also have to bring the financing to the table, otherwise the deal will not move forward. In this particular slide is what I have been talking, who are the parties that we normally see on a transaction, be insurance or guarantee. And again, do not worry what program should I be using with Exim Bank, be a guarantee, be a loan, or whatsoever. As you deal with your transaction and your customer, we are available to help you determine which of our product is the appropriate one for the transaction. So that's our job in helping you out. Your job is to go out and sell it, get the contract, and actually make sure that you're getting an entity that is at the end of the day will be eligible for our financing. Our inkling in our day-to-day operation is to support U.S. exporters. So when we have an application, we do everything possible to make it move forward. And sometimes we ask for additional documentation or guarantees, but our purpose is to support the U.S. good. So help us help you by submitting a complete application with the correct information. So normally you have a U.S. supplier selling to a foreign entity right here, and that foreign entity can go either to a financial institution who in turn will get the payment to the supplier and then come to Exim Bank for the actual loan or insurance reimbursement. These are the normal parties that you see in a transaction. Of course, if we are talking about a larger transaction, perhaps the financial structure is a little bit different. Here's to give you just a quick overview of what kind of, how do we determine terms. When we're talking about capital equipment, obviously we will look at capital equipment and determine what is the appropriate for that particular capital equipment. But in the cases that we're dealing with parts and things to that effect, it's a little bit more difficult to pinpoint it. So we came up with some contract price numbers to give us a better understanding. So anything, under that $80,000, we say it might fall under 2 years. Granted, if we're talking about a lot of parts and little parts, maybe something that is off the shelf, that is sold on a 30, 60 days basis, and maybe we can go 180 days or a year, and maybe the maximum will be 2 years. So each transaction will have to be looked over based on its own merit. And as you can see, the higher the amount, $350 to $10 million, we can go up to 5 years in some, and up to 10 years in some transactions. The requirements are we cover 85% of a transaction. That means that we expect the foreign buyer to accept a 15% cash payment to you. When we say cash cash payment. We're still going back to probably 1934 language, where actually people used to pay cash or with a check. What we mean 15% is that before Exim Bank disbursed on that 85%, there has to be some kind of evidence that you got paid that 15%. Whether you as a U.S. exporter decide to finance that 15%, that is acceptable to Exim Bank as long as you, the terms of that financing does not exceed our term and that the actual interest or anything that you're charging are market prices. So you can finance that 15%. Or sometimes when you have a lender, the lender will finance 100% of the transaction, 85% guaranteed by Exim Bank, and 15% out in not guaranteed and based on market rate. Of course, the banks are able to extend credit at longer term than normal and interest rate more favorable because they don't have a risk on the transaction. The Export-Import Bank is bearing the entire risk of the transaction. The 15% probably will be in their books, therefore the interest rate is going to be higher on that one.
Excuse me, Xiomara?
Sure.
Hi, this is Linda. I think we're getting close to the hour, and I just want to make sure there's enough time for Q&A.
Sure.
I think you're doing a great job. I just want to make sure that audience has time for a Q&A.
Perfect. Well, I'm just going to go very quickly just to give you a flavor. So we were on that, and there is a calculator on the web that will tell you pretty much how much we will charge on the transaction. And you will have this presentation, so it talks about different programs. And one that is important, and Maggie touched on it, and Julio, environmental. These are transactions that we can do between 15 and 18 years on environmental clean energy, so keep that in mind. Something that is, we offer capitalized interest as well as construction of local costs. I also included some example because I think that's very helpful in understanding what we do. And our webpage is here right in front of you. We are very interested in supporting you. We have a letter of interest program, which is if you're trying to sell something in Colombia and you need a little push, something that shows that the Export-Import Bank is interested, there is a letter of interest application online. And of course, I'll be available to answer any question and for future phone calls on whatever you need. I truly appreciate your contributing and helping us meet our requirements of highlighting Colombia as one of our biggest markets. Help me increase our numbers and help yourselves increase sales and supporting U.S. jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xiomara. Now I'd like to turn this over really quickly, I think, to Nayamusi, Igami, and Delilah de Sousa for their additional comments.
Thank you, Linda. This is Delilah, and just considering the opportunities and the potential for U.S. companies in Colombia, we are working with the embassy there and have organized a trade mission from Louisiana and Texas. However, the mission will be open to other companies if they meet the requirements. The cost of the trade, or the dates, are November 1st through the 5th. To Bogota and also to Cartagena, where we will also be participating and attending the petroleum exposition in Cartagena. The cost is $2,500 per SME and $3,300 for large firms, and SME being 500 employees or less. We can send you the flyer if you haven't received it already, and the information is on several websites. And Naya, do you have something to add to that?
You should have all received information about the trade mission. If not, please visit the Houston website or the New Orleans website. That information will be provided to you at the end of this call and also be sent to you as a follow-up. Our deadline for registration is September 30th, and we're operating on a first-come, first-served basis.
The trade mission will include a briefing, some matchmaking meetings, networking events in both Bogota and Cartagena, hotel assistance, and transportation, secure transportation, and perhaps even a site visit. We're still working to confirm some of the agenda and the schedule, but we think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity to meet with Colombian counterparts, other foreign companies doing business in Colombia, as well as some U.S. companies that have some of the major contracts down there. So that's it for that. If you want more information, please let us know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Delilah, and thank you, Naya. Everyone, I just would like to let you know a couple of things. One, in front of you is the contact information of all of our speakers from today's webinar, so please make a note of this. You can contact them by phone or by email if you have any questions. Also, we are going to open this webinar for voice questions first. If you have a voice question, please press *1. But before we go there, just one more reminder. If you would like a copy of all these slides, the Exim Bank slides, the commercial service slides, as well as the handouts, please go to the icon on the upper right-hand side of your computer. It looks like there are 3 pieces of paper. It's a white icon. One piece of paper is overlapping the other 2. And if you put your mouse's cursor over there and put a check mark by the box for each of those presentations, or the box next to each of those documents, you can either upload it or download it to whatever folder or your desktop. So that is handy for you for right now. So I'm going to give it to the operator so that she can answer any of your voice questions. Please press *1.
Thank you. We'll now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw, press *2. And one moment for our first question. Kinda, your line is open. You may ask your question.
Yeah, I have a question to Ms. Margaret Hansen, and she said at the beginning of the presentation, what was the 2 firms from Chicago that they won the contracts in Colombia?
The 2 firms are both actually Houston-based. One is Chicago Bridge and Iron, very well known for their refinery modernization technology, and the other is a very famous engineering services firm, Foster Wheeler.
Wheeler, okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Daniel Marquez, your line is open. You may ask your question.
Thank you. I just have sent you a question via the webinar, and I don't know if you're receiving that information. And also, I never had any voice contact through the webinar.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Daniel. This is Linda. Yes, we did get your written question, so we have that on file. I'm sorry about the audio. Perhaps we can talk about that offline. But, yes, we can answer your question also by voice. I have your question here saying, question for USA Commercial Services, do you have a list of major projects available, and can you provide advice on tax requirements for invoices?
Yes. That's
well,
correct.
Daniel, I want to tell you that when you download the presentation I gave, there's a script. So you can see all the words that I use in all the descriptions, so you'll be able to pick up on what we discussed. Major projects are listed for oil and gas in that presentation and also in the handouts that we just sent to Linda and Naya and Delilah. And regarding tax, we don't give tax information. We will refer you to a small business here that does tax consulting so that you can get the correct information. And if you don't understand what they're telling you, then certainly we'll get back in touch with you and them to try and make sure that you get a clear answer. But it's just like we're not lawyers either. We don't give legal advice and we don't give tax advice.
Thank you. I also want to tell you that was very valuable information, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. What I hope we communicated, Xiomara, Naya, Delia, Julio, and myself, is our excitement about the opportunities in this market. This was unthinkable 10 years ago. Honestly, when President Uribe took office, they were shooting at him, and there were bombs going off. But the amazing transformation that has come about as a result of Plan Colombia, if you have never been to Colombia and you come now, you'll just be amazed. It's a beautiful country with a beautiful capital city. Cartagena, also, where the refinery modernization is going on, is just a tourist mecca, and it's completely not like what people would have you believe in the news. It's a very, very different country now, and because of the demise of Venezuela's economy and the stability of its government, many headquarters have come to Bogota that used to be located in Caracas, and that's also part of the reason we've experienced such an incredible growth during my 3 years here.
Well, again, thanks, and I share your excitement and look forward to find some business opportunities here in the country.
Join the trade mission.
Okay.
All right.
Roberto Ortiz, your line is open. You may ask your question.
Good afternoon. I had the opportunity to meet Julio Carbo, and just last week I met with Pam Plegans, and we're very interested in participating with the trade mission from Texas and Louisiana. My question is the following. If I already have a partner in Colombia, can my partner be part of my team as for the trade commission?
Yes, it can. No problem.
Okay.
Okay. The trade mission is directed. It has three components. Number one, people who don't have a representative and are looking for one will make appointments to help you find a representative. Number two, people who want high-level contacts, our intent is to have a meeting with the president of Ecopetrol and everybody who's listed in Julio's contact sheet that are part of the handouts, so that you one-on-one have an opportunity to establish a relationship and therefore go forward and develop your opportunities with Ecopetrol. And the third component is the certified trade show down in Cartagena, where you have the opportunity to make a technical presentation, to have one-on-one meetings, to go view the refinery. We think it's a very complete program when you add also Julio's research report. We think you'll be able to do business.
What is the major difference between going with you guys and signing up directly with Campetrol?
You won't have the one-on-one meetings with the Ecopetrol officials. And we're keeping our fingers crossed that Javier Gutierrez remains as the president of Ecopetrol. We've worked with him for many, many years. He's a really excellent businessman, and we're hoping that he continues to guide the company. But if there's a change, our goal is to make sure that we get the president of Ecopetrol at a luncheon addressing our audience of the trade mission, and also with his staff, that, again, those people should not change, that Julio's put in the handouts, the contacts page, the very last page.
Yeah, he's a wonderful speaker. I had the opportunity to listen to him a couple of weeks ago when I was in Colombia for the Andean Energy Summit.
Right, and we brought him to OTC this year. He was kind enough to give us a day of his time to come and speak at the lunch dedicated to Colombia, at the breakfast.
Yes, I was there too.
Yeah. Okay.
The other question that I have, if I may, please, is you mentioned that when we travel to Colombia, to Bogota, as part of the trade mission, then we will go to Cartagena for the conference over there. You mentioned a little while ago that we will have to make a presentation, technical presentation during the conference?
No, we're offering you that option.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's not required at all. But the idea is that we've got all these cool American companies with excellent world-class technology. We want you guys to get up there and do your show and tell on a technical topic, and then, obviously it's a soft sell for your products, but nevertheless people will then remember you as one of the presenters, and hopefully you'll get invited back for another opportunity to present elsewhere in the country.
Okay, and the $2,500, that's for the small companies with less than 500 people. That's for the fee for 2 people, correct?
That's correct.
And that includes the Cartagena.
That's correct. Everything, what's not included is your airfare and your hotel, but everything else is included.
Wonderful. And $500 for each additional person in my team.
That's right. We had one company, when we did Louisiana trade mission for ports, bring 4 people, and we couldn't get them out of Colombia. They found so much business and had such a good time. In Cartagena, we also want you to have a good time. It's a beautiful city, and we'll be arranging a tour of the port, we'll be arranging a tour of the refinery, and we'll be arranging probably meeting with the mayor and other valuable individuals who will be able to help you with your business opportunities.
Is there a limited number of people in the trade mission from each company?
Nope. But just understand you'll get one appointment schedule, and then you guys can switch off. That's what the company did. They switched on and off individuals that were doing the appointments depending on what the goal was. But there's no limit, no.
It's a one-on-one, you said, with Mr. Gutierrez.
No, it's an opportunity for a closed luncheon with him. Not one-on-one. It's an opportunity for a closed luncheon. And so we've got the trade mission estimated to be 24 companies. So at 2 people per company, that's 48 companies, and then the staff, and that's it. Those are the only people that would be at the lunch, and anybody that Mr. Gutierrez wants to bring.
I understand.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest.
Valdemar Narjano, your line is open. You may ask your question.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is, for a company like ours that is not involved on the oil and gas industry, but we are an engineering firm, and is there any opportunity for something like a mentor project opportunity, or something like a company like ours can be trained or partnered or open to that industry in Colombia?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what industry you were interested in.
Well, we're a company that we are in the engineering management, construction management industry.
Yes.
But we are not in the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
However, we would like to be on it, so I was wondering, is there any opportunities for a company like ours to partner or be on a mentor project with companies that are in the oil and gas industry right now?
Well, what you would do is come down and offer your services and look for a local partner to represent your company here. So we could include you, and I guess you would just have to prove that you have some expertise that a local company would be willing to work with you to deliver to Ecopetrol, CB&I, or Foster Wheeler, or Exxon, Chevron. I mean, we've got quite a few major companies here in both exploration. We've talked mostly about the refinery opportunities, but there's also opportunities in the exploration part. And so if there's synergies there with the companies that we introduce you to, then anything's possible. We had a company like yours also come on the Louisiana trade mission, and they met a major partner, and they were very happy. But what they needed to do was find a local partner here, and then they found a very big business opportunity to supply to a U.S. company, and they also are now doing supply services to companies here in Colombia. So it's completely up to you. This is the point of a trade mission. What we're trying to do is help you make the go, no-go decision. All right? There's nobody going to, if it doesn't work out, that happens sometimes. But honestly, 9.5 times out of 10, people go away with a huge amount of knowledge, a huge amount of contacts, almost too much information in terms of, what do we do next? And then it becomes a real issue to sit down and prioritize. But the point is, it's a safe, less expensive way of coming to the market than you just jumping on an airplane, coming down here, and getting the yellow pages and trying to figure out what to do next. We sort of guide you.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, and the company that you mentioned in Louisiana, that was an engineering company or a management company?
It was a manufacturing company, but they also had engineering services because they had to install what they manufactured.
Okay.
And one of the big sponsors, they didn't realize it was a company they'd been knocking. What ends up happening is U.S. companies end up hooking up on trade missions. That's the other thing we've seen happen, and that's exactly what happened for that little company. They got access to company executives for a huge account that they've been trying to land for years, and now they're doing business with that U.S. company, and that big U.S. company is exporting to Colombia. So they became a supplier. Does that make sense?
Yes. So do you definitely recommend for a company that is not in the industry to participate on it to see what opportunities they may be coming from there?
I do.
Okay.
I do, especially construction, because there's so much involved in these modernizations and upgrades that some of these things are going to be greenfield. So there's construction implied right there.
Right.
Okay, so to me, you're still fit.
Okay. The other question was more on the if you're a U.S. small business, what regulations or requirements do we need to comply in order to obtain an insurance or a guarantee or with the export-import group that made a presentation earlier?
Dilmata, are you there?
Yes. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, my question was for a U.S. small business in here, we're in Houston, we're a small business.
Mm-hmm.
What requirements do we need to comply in order to obtain, like, insurance or support from you if we're going to try to pursue a business in Colombia?
Right. As I mentioned earlier, small business is a market of interest for us. It's a sector. We do have an office in Houston specifically in managing small business. But as far as what we can do, there are several ways that we can work it out. And it could be working capital, a loan to your company, or it could be insurance. And the requirements are we look at the actual foreign entity to make sure that that foreign entity has the capacity to repay us. So as far as you're concerned, we look that you are an established company and that you are actually able to perform whatever contract you sign with the foreign buyer.
Okay, so we can start that process before we start identifying the prospect buyers in Colombia, right?
Absolutely. I encourage you as a small business to contact our offices in Houston, and they can guide you. And depending on what exactly you're thinking and what kind of engineering services you are providing, they can guide you as to which of our product will be more beneficial for you.
Okay. Okay, excellent.
Excuse me, this is Naya in Houston. Can you repeat your name so that I can get the local Exim?
Yeah, my name is Vladimir.
Okay.
If you look at the attendees list, it's Vladimir Naranjo.
Okay, I will contact you after the call with that information. Thank you.
Do you need my phone number or anything else?
I have that information.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other thing Julio and I wanted to mention, and this was in response to the second question, is we're negotiating with Campetrol for booth space. So we haven't finished that negotiation. We're kind of waiting to see an indicative list of the potential trade mission members to figure out how much space we want to take for the American Pavilion down in Cartagena. So you would actually have a place to conduct your one-on-one meetings right there on the show floor. I believe they're in the morning, or they're in the afternoons or the morning?
In the morning.
In the mornings. In the mornings, we're dedicating to one-on-one meetings when you're not going off on tours to see actual work sites and things like that. So that's another benefit that I forgot to mention about participating with us. We'll be building an American Pavilion, and all you'll need to do is bring your pop-up booth or bring your handouts to supply, and please make those handouts in Spanish.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vladimir, for your interest. We appreciate it.
Anthony Pagano, you may ask your question.
Yes, hello. My question is, are there any benefits or advantages to be as a women-owned business or a small or minority-owned business?
When it comes to financing, there might be with Exim, but we pretty much treat everybody the same in terms of providing them with services.
And that's correct. We do treat this women on just with the same interest as we do a small business.
One of my colleagues here has a question as well. Scott.
Yeah, I guess and to add to that question, if you've already facilitated a loan to, for example, Ecopetrol, are there any directives or any incentives for them when they come to the U.S. to do business with U.S. companies if they are small or minority owned?
Well, that's an excellent question. And one of the reasons why Ecopetrol signed the agreement is because there are interest in U.S. exporters. What we have done in the past, for instance, and I hate to mention it, but it's a different country, in Mexico, is there is a facility specifically geared towards small business. Now, that facility, the driver of that particular program was Pemex. We are hoping to duplicate it and do the same thing with Ecopetrol. We're not there yet. But if you have an item, good, or service that you think will fit with Ecopetrol, I encourage you to get in touch with our procurement office in Houston.
And this will be exactly the kind of stuff we'd like you to raise at the lunch with Ecopetrol, because we're going to put all of the kingpins, if you will, in front of you, and you can say, hey, did you know that Pemex in Mexico got this kind of facility with Exim Bank? Is this something that Ecopetrol might be interested in? I'm sure they're not even thinking about it, and it may end up happening just as a result of you mentioning it. So, Anthony's friend, I didn't catch your name. I think it's a great initiative, and you'll be able to present it to the Ecopetrol group when you come.
Yeah, the name was Toby Little, and thanks for your response.
Okay, thanks, Toby. Good point.
Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. There are no questions at this time.
Okay, well, I just want to give everyone another chance to ask their questions. We do have some written questions here. I know we're going beyond the hour, so I'm just going to address a couple that I see in the written portion, and then we'll conclude. This one is from Mark Lamb. Are the U.S. Embassy personnel in Bogota available to meet with U.S. representatives visiting Bogota, and if so, how can we contact you? That's from Mark Lamb.
Well, the contact information list is up there, and yes, we're available to meet with you. We beg you to give us at least 1 month's notice because our office is swamped at this time. We try to respond to our emails in 48 hours just to say, we got your email, we'll get back to you on X day. But we're running a 100-person trade mission this month. Next month it's a 50-person trade mission, and then we have a lot of shows going on in October. So we do like to meet with U.S. companies. Just give us a chance to make an appointment properly and give you the time that you deserve. People fall on our doorstep a week in advance, and we have to say no. It's just sometimes not possible.
Thank you, Maggie. And then our last question here is from Valdemir Naranjo. The question is, what are the requirements for the small business in the United States to obtain insurance from Export-Import Bank?
I think that's been answered.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well then great. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you everyone for listening, and I apologize for the delay. I hope we've helped you. I hope we've provided the information you need and answered all of your questions. Please check out the websites, www.buyusa.gov/New Orleans, and also www.buyusa.gov/Houston. Also, please check out the U.S. Commercial Services website at www.export.gov for more upcoming events and webinars. Once again, the contact information is in front of you. And to download all the slides, we also have an additional slide presented from Margaret Hanson-Muse. She gave us great information on specific points that it would be very useful for you. It's all up on that icon on the upper right-hand side of your computer, and all you have to do is just download that to your computer and you'll have it. Once again, thank you, everybody. Thanks to our speakers, Maggie, Julio, Xiomara, Delilah, and Naya, and thank you all of our participants for joining us. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That does conclude today's conference call. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.